Philip Hammond calls EU the enemy. 0033 Philip Hammonds' political fightback unraveled today after he was forced to apologise for describing the EU as the enemy ahead of crucial talks in Brussels next week. Following days of accusations that he was seeking to block Brexit, the Chancellor gave a round of television interviews yesterday in which he sought to reach out to Eurosceptics by criticising the EU. However, within minutes he was forced to apologise after Downing Street was informed of the enemy comment. The Prime Minister is now facing growing calls to fire her Chancellor amid fears his repeated interventions over Brexit have helped throw the government into disarray. The Chancellor insisted he had no intention of resigning after Tory grandee Lord Lawson called for his sacking, and described claims that he is pessimistic about Brexit as bizarre. But his plans to put his difficult week behind him backfired spectacularly in a television interview during a visit to Washington, where he is attending the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund. Mr. Hammond told Sky News, "I understand that passions are high. I understand that people have very strong views about this, but we are all going to the same place. In an interview today I was making the point that we are united at home. I regret I used a poor choice of words." 12 Philip Hammond at Philip Hammonds, October 13, 2017. We all have the same agenda. We all signed up to the Prime Minister's Lancaster House speech. We're all signed up to the Article 50 letter. We're all behind the speech that she made in Florence. Then, in an apparent attempt to reach out to hardline Brexiteers, he added, "The enemy, the opponents, are out there on the other side of the table. Those are the people that we have to negotiate with to get the very best deal for Britain." The Chancellor quickly tried to limit the damage by tweeting in an interview today, "I was making the point that we are united at home. I regret I used a poor choice of words. We will work with our friends and partners in the EU on a mutually beneficial Brexit deal." He added the hashtag #9meshare. It is understood that it was Mr. Hammond's decision to carry out the interviews, but when he made his enemy slip up, his aides informed Downing Street of what had happened and discussed the plan to tweet an apology, which was approved by Number 10. Philip Hammond credit Getty. The Prime Minister's official spokesman, who had used a morning briefing to political journalists to say Theresa May still had full confidence in her Chancellor, had to repeat the assurance later in the day following Mr. Hammond's blunder. Labour responded by accusing him of behaving like Basil Fawlty on holiday. Meanwhile in Luxembourg, Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission president, used a debate at a university to thank Britain for saving Europe during the Second World War but demand the UK should now pay a bigger Brexit divorce bill. He compared Brexit to buying a round of drinks for 28 people in a pub and then discovering one wants to leave without paying. It came as it emerged Mr. Hammond has spent the last few weeks secretly meeting Tory backbenchers as part of a charm offensive to shore up support ahead of his forthcoming autumn budget. The Chancellor is said to have been assiduously talking to his fellow Conservative MPs in a bid to prove he is in listening mode. At a glance, Brexit roadblocks. Earlier this week, Lord Lawson, the former Conservative Chancellor, said Mr. Hammond should be sacked after he undermined the Prime Minister's attempts to put pressure on EU Brexit negotiators by saying Britain was prepared to spend money getting ready for a no-deal outcome. Mr. Hammond said he would only release cash at the very last moment, and when it was responsible to do so, which critics said weakened Mrs. May's hand. He had also been accused of talking Britain down and having an Eeyorish attitude towards the country's prospects. Asked if he would resign after Lord Lawson's demand for the Prime Minister to sack him, Mr. Hammond said no. He added Nigel Lawson is entitled to his opinion on this and many other subjects, and he is not afraid to express them, and that is absolutely his privilege. G20 finance leaders pose at the IMF conference in Washington. Mr. Hammond rejected accusations of pessimism, saying he found it a slightly bizarre observation and insisted that he was very optimistic about the UK economy. Once current uncertainties, which are damaging consumption and investment, were resolved, he expected the economy to start powering forward. The Chancellor also sought to justify an article he wrote in the Times newspaper which sparked fury among cabinet colleagues who saw it as an attempt to frustrate Brexit plans and talk down the UK's prospects after leaving. He said, "I made an intervention by writing a piece in the Times on Wednesday and did that because over a number of days there had been suggestions that I was causing the Treasury to block preparations for a no-deal Brexit. I wrote that piece in order to rebut that allegation, because the Treasury is in fact planning for a full range of outcomes from a comprehensive free trade and security collaboration to a breakdown in talks and potentially non-cooperative exit scenario. We are planning for a range of scenarios. It is not a binary issue, deal or no deal. The details: how do Switzerland and Canada's EU deals compare? Labour's Peter Dowd, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said these are foolish remarks by Philip Hammond, and reveal that he is clearly feeling the pressure from Tory MPs calling for him to be sacked. The tone of this rhetoric will obviously not unblock negotiations or help protect our economic interests. The Chancellor should be putting the country before the infighting in his own party when he is representing us overseas, and refrain from acting like Basil Fawlty on holiday. Downing Street dismissed reports that suggested the Prime Minister and the Chancellor can barely stand to be in the same room as each other. A Number 10 spokeswoman said they have a very good working relationship and they work very closely together. Mr. Hammond will deliver his autumn budget on November 22, and knows that he cannot afford to make any mistakes after his humiliating climb down over national insurance contributions following the spring budget. He has been enlisted the support of backbenchers and road testing his plans to avoid the same thing happening again. One backbencher said Mr. Hammond has been asking for thoughts on the budget and then scheduling meetings with anyone who has expressed concerns.